Yes, a new journey with Jesus. When I was thinking what to bring, I had two other subjects, and I said to Alison and Neil, I think I'm going to preach this. And Neil said, well, I preached that 3 weeks ago. Right, okay. Then I came up with another idea that I thought the Lord had given to me, and said to Liz about it. She said, yeah, she said, you preached on that a few weeks ago. Right, Lord, what do you want me to say today? And he kindly gave me this word. And I pray that it's really going to touch you and that it fits in with what's happened to our dear friend David. So in my younger days, I used to own my own business. And along with a business partner, at the time, I have to say that we were quite successful. And we had many staff who worked for us. And I used to say, all I need to do is to hold on to the shirt tails of my business partner, and I will be a very, very rich man. In fact, this was in my early days, I said I will retire when I'm 30. I know I haven't reached it yet, but I'm getting there. Now 30 came and it went, and then it was 40. 40 came and it went, and I was looking at 50. But then in my early 40s, my life was to change. My then wife, she wanted a divorce, and for a while I spiraled out of control. And with it, my interest in the business, it just faded away as I tried to come to terms with what I was going to do now. And it was during this time that I met my new wife Liz, and she started to tell me all about Jesus. Now, I'd been brought up in a Christian home, so I knew the truth. And deep down, as we started to speak, that flame, it had never gone out, and it started to burn afresh within me. So my journey, it was changing, and my desire to be rich, it was fading away, along with my desire to stick with my business partner and the business itself. In time, me and Liz, we got married, and we went on our honeymoon to Jamaica. No jokes, thank you very much. And it was while I was there, that Liz, she gave me a book, and it's called The Book of God. And it was a novel, and it was the complete Bible story, and it was large. When I completed it, it asked the question on the very last page. It said, would I like to give my life to Jesus? And with that, in our hotel room, I got on my knees and I gave my life to him. And it was shortly after that, on returning home, I had no job or any idea what I was going to do, but I went to my business partner and I told him I wanted out, and I gave him all of my shares. Then I think it was within about 18 months that the business itself, it went bankrupt, owing an awful lot of money to an awful lot of people, and God, he had saved me from that. I could go around this room, couldn't I? And I could also say to all you people watching me online, I could ask you the question, when did your journey change when you had an encounter with Jesus? And we can look at many journeys within the Bible that took a different turn once they had an encounter with God. The exodus of the people of Israel from Egypt, for instance. They were told by Moses that they were going on a journey and they were going to go to the promised land that was going to be full of milk and honey. And God, he opened up the Red Sea to allow them to escape and cross en route to the promised land. But after that amazing miracle, It wasn't long before they started to moan and started to grumble to Moses about God and how they would have been better off had they stayed as slaves in Egypt rather than come on this journey. So what should have been an 11-day journey, a walk to reach the promised land, in fact it took the Israelites 40 years. Because all the Israelites did on their journey, as I just said, was to grumble. And so they did not encounter what God had for each and every one of them. In fact, the original generation that left Egypt didn't get to see their inheritance, the promised land. What a waste is that? There's a lesson for us all here. If God has a journey for you that he wants you to travel on, he will not give up. And he will allow you to travel around and around that same old mountain until you get it. Jonah was told by God, we can read in Jonah chapter 1 and verse 2, he was told to go to the great city of Nineveh and to preach against it, because its wickedness has come up before me, said the Lord. But what did Jonah do? We can read in verse 3, he ran in the opposite direction and he was heading for Tarshish. And we all know the story of Jonah, don't we? God, he chased after him. And there was a great storm on the ship, and Jonah knew that it was because of his disobedience. And he asked to be thrown overboard, where a great fish swallowed him up. And with that, Jonah came to his senses. Sometimes it takes a little bit, doesn't it? With that, Jonah came to his senses and he did what God told him to do in the first place. And then he headed off to Nineveh. You see, we can run away from God, but we can't hide. Is it not just best to do what God tells us to do in the first place and save ourselves all the grief and the pain that we then put ourselves through when we run away in the hope that he hasn't noticed us and he'll just get somebody else to do the job instead? Now the journey of Paul, now that was different. Paul, who was formerly known as Saul, it says in the word he was a Pharisee of Pharisees, who intensely persecuted the followers of Jesus. In fact, it says in verse 2 of Acts chapter 9, he was on his way to Damascus, so that if he found any there who belonged to the way, as it was known of then, before it was known as Christians, that he might take them as prisoners back to Jerusalem. But Jesus, he had a different idea, didn't he? And we can read about this in verses 3 and 6 of Acts chapter 9. It says, as he neared Damascus on his journey, that is Paul, suddenly a light from heaven, it flashed around him. It says he fell to the ground and he heard a voice saying to him, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? Who are you, Lord? Paul asked. I am Jesus, who you are persecuting. Now get up and go into the city, and you will be told what you must do. And we know the story, don't we? Unlike the Israelites or Jonah, Paul did as he was told immediately. And as we say, the rest is history, with the newly named Apostle Paul going on to write 25% of the New Testament. Now Jesus, he used the Apostle Paul in a huge way because he was obedient in the first place. 1 Samuel chapter 15 and verse 22. Does the Lord delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as much as in obeying the voice of the Lord? To obey is better than sacrifice, and to heed is better than the fat of rams. In other words, just do as the Lord tells you and me in the first place. Instead of making excuses after excuse, continually asking for forgiveness and putting off until tomorrow what the Lord is asking of you today. Verse 23 goes on. It says, the rebellion is like the sin of divination. Divination. My wife tells me off every time and I don't say it right. And arrogance, like the evil of adultery. Now, I'm not saying here that we are following other idols or that we are getting into adultery. But what I am saying is that it's better to obey in the first place than continually run away from God for what He may have you to do. Now, the book, The Pilgrim's Progress, by John Bunyan, is all about a dream and the character Christian who is on a journey of faith, which leads him from his hometown of destruction to the celestial city. And we see as his journey unfolds, he goes the wrong way many times and he gets himself into all sorts of trouble. And after new instruction, he has to go back to the path to find the correct route that he should be taking. And this path he has to go on, he has to find what they call in the book the wicket gate that will lead him on his journey to the celestial city. And we can do that, can't we? On our journey with the Lord, we can think that we can find a shortcut to our destination. And there's only one path. Matthew chapter 8, verses 13 and 14. Enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, but many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life. Now, our journey on the narrow path, that can also be difficult. But the difference is that Jesus promises to walk on that path with us. Christian, he also met many people on his journey to the celestial city who found it too difficult, and they turned back to their old way of lives, and they went back to their old town of destruction. Don't let us be a people who do that. In verse 33 of John chapter 17, Jesus says, in this world you will have troubles, but take heart, because I have overcome the world. So the good news, as we can read in verse 5 of Hebrews chapter 13, is that Jesus says, never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. So Jesus, he promises to come on the journey with us. So how is your journey going? Are you walking on the correct path that Jesus wants you to walk on today? Are you like the Apostle Paul and you're embracing the new journey that God has set before you? Or if you're honest, are you a bit like the Israelites or Jonah and running away or holding back on the path that the Lord wants you to travel on? Now, what I've learned over the years is that I cannot do anyone else's journey, only my own. When I get to see Jesus face to face, he will ask me about my life and what I did with it. He will mention nobody else, only my journey, and if I walked it with him. So can I ask you again this morning, how was your journey? Is it pleasing to God? Will Jesus say to you, my good and faithful servant, when he sees you face to face? You see, if we have given our life to Jesus, we will go to heaven. But we may have missed out on the many blessings that Jesus had for each and every one of us while we were here on planet Earth. But because of our disobedience to obey him and undertake all the instruction that he had for us to do, but we're going to miss out on what we could have had. The story is told of a gentleman who died, and I've told this story before, but it fits. So I want to tell you this story again. The gentleman, he dies and he arrives at the pearly gates of heaven. And he's welcomed there by St. Peter. And he asks him if he will show him all around heaven. The man's excited. So the tour begins. And St. Peter starts showing him all around. At the end of the tour, St. Peter says, well, that's it. There's the tour of heaven. He said, well, what about that building over there? You never showed me in there. He said, you don't want to be seen in that building. That building's not for you. He said, you said you would show me in every single building. So reluctantly, he takes him in. And he says, this is the building where all the unused blessings are kept. Shelf after shelf after shelf of people's unused blessings. The gentleman turns around and he says to Peter, he says, is there a shelf there for me? He said, yes, sadly there is. And he shows him the shelf for all the blessings that he could have had while he was on earth. So can I encourage you this morning to go for it with Jesus and not give up and complete the journey that he has for you to do, so that you may receive your blessings that Jesus has for you while you are here still on earth, instead of allowing them to sit on a shelf unused in heaven. Judges chapter 18 and verse 6 says, your journey has the Lord's approval. It's your journey and your journey alone. So may I encourage you, as I encourage myself, to pursue it. Jesus has set a journey for your life. It says in Isaiah chapter 35 and verse 8, and a highway will be there. It will be called the way of holiness. The unclean will not journey on it. It will be for those who walk in that way. Now I'm sure that Jesus has plans for each and every one of you. But you have to decide to take that journey. That well-known verse, we all know it, Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. For Dave McInerney, his journey here on earth, it came to a sudden end last Monday afternoon, where without warning, he just fell down and died in an instant, in the twinkling of an eye. But I believe before his body hit the ground that the angels got hold of his spirit and they carried him away to his eternal home in heaven. In his early days, Dave was on a journey to destruction. If he were here now, he would tell you of his troubles with alcohol, and he would tell you that he was an alcoholic for many years. But one day, he had an encounter with Jesus. So he left the town of destruction that he was on, and he set himself on a new journey with Jesus. It was to prove to be a journey of a lifetime of forgiveness, a journey that set him totally free from his old life, and it gave him a new hope and a freedom that he was forgiven and that he was set free in the name of Jesus. And it was a journey that one day would lead him to his forever home in the celestial city. Now, the quick passing of David has also reminded me that we need to keep short accounts on people. Not to harbour issues with anyone, but to sort them out now before it's too late. Let's be honest here, we're never going to get on and agree with everybody, are we? But many of the things that we get ourselves upset about, they are just over trivial matters. And if we let the years go by waiting for them to come to us, aren't we? Waiting for them to come to us to say they are sorry. Can I suggest that it is you today? Can I suggest that you just take the higher ground and you contact them and you say that I'm sorry for the part that I did. And if possible, can we please, can we start again before it's all too late? Because we all want Jesus to say to us when we meet him, don't we, face to face? As I'm sure that he has said to David, my good and faithful servant, welcome into my Father's kingdom. So don't let us allow anything to get in the way. But let's complete our new journey with Jesus as we've begun it. Many of us have been Christians for a long time. When we began it, we were full of the joys of the Lord. Let's get hold of that afresh if we need to. Now, in closing, I'd like to read a bit of my word for today, which I received on Friday. Many people who get this word as well, so you would know what I'm going to say. It says, I cannot share your intimacy with Jesus, and you cannot share mine. Each of us has to develop our own relationship with him. You cannot develop this intimacy through your church or your pastor. It's about an encounter with Christ. I am following a man. I'm not following an organisation. I'm not even following a religion. He is the one. He is the one who died for us. He is the one who protects us, who comforts us, and who provides for our needs. He is the one who gives us peace. And his name is Jesus. We're blessed, aren't we? And there's a prayer at the bottom of that I'd like to share with you. It says, Holy Father, you desire to have me walk in an intimate relationship with Jesus, your Son. Thank you for the wonderful gift of intimacy with you. May the friendship become more real and intimate each and every day. Amen. Amen.